Hi, I'm Steve from the Rooted Podcast, and I hope you can join me every weekday for a 5-minute or less devotional word study or insight into Scripture to add to your day. Welcome to Fruit Snacks. Hey everyone, in today's closer look, we're going to examine an apparent contradiction in Scripture and take a look at how we can resolve it based on a better, more nuanced understanding of the Greek in the text. The alleged contradiction, which you may or may not have heard about, depending on how much you frequent blogs and YouTube pages dedicated to quote-unquote debunking the Bible, is a contradiction between Acts chapter 9, verse 7, and Acts chapter 22, verse 9. Now, in both of those passages, Paul is recounting his conversion experience on the road to Damascus. And I'll go ahead and read both of them because they're short. In Acts chapter 9, verse 7, it says, "The men who were traveling with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, but seeing no one." And in Acts chapter 22, verse 9, the text in most translations reads, "Now those who were with me saw the light, but did not hear the voice of the one who was speaking to me." And so people who will say that the Bible has contradictions would look at these two passages and say, see, here Paul says in one place that the men who were with him heard the voice, but in another passage he turns around and says they didn't hear anything. So they can't hear and not have heard. So obviously there's a contradiction between here. Paul can't get his story straight. Well, if we take a closer look at the Greek word that Paul is using in both of these passages, it's the same one. It is the Greek word akouo, and it does most literally mean to hear. But what's interesting is contextually, this word often has a much more nuanced connotation to it, not just of physically hearing, as in the sound waves are coming into your ear canal and your brain is registering that, hey, there's a sound there. But it has to do with comprehension and understanding. And what's interesting is that a lot of Bible translations will actually take this contextual meaning into account when they translate Acts chapter 22, verse 9. For instance, the ESV is one of them. So I'll read how the English Standard Version renders Acts 22:9. "Now those who were with me saw the light, but did not understand the voice of the one who was speaking to me." I think that's an easy way and honestly a very fair way to the original language to translate and interpret these passages. So what Paul is saying in Acts chapter 9 is actually perfectly consistent with what he's saying in Acts chapter 22. So what is he saying? He's saying he was on his way to Damascus and there was a very bright light from heaven that caused everyone to basically fall to the ground. And while they were on the ground, there was a bright light. Paul and his companions heard a voice. But what Paul says is only he really understood what the voice was saying. To the other men who were with him, they didn't have comprehension. They didn't really grasp what was being said. That message was intended just for Paul. Also, Paul sees that there's a person there in the light, and that person is Jesus. He names himself as such. But the men who were with him didn't see a figure in the light. They only saw this bright, blinding light. So when we read the passages together again, we'll see that this is resolved. Paul says in Acts 9, "The men who were traveling with him stood speechless, hearing the voice," so that they're registering a sound, but seeing no one, just a light. And then Paul in chapter 22 says, "Now those who were with me saw the light," which is true. They didn't see the person, just the light, but did not understand the voice of the one who was speaking to me. So they heard the words, they heard the noise, but couldn't understand the message. And that's completely consistent. So when we take a closer look at these passages, we see that even though they're in many English translations would appear to be a contradiction on the surface, closer inspection shows us that's not actually the case.